The call came at 11:47 on a Tuesday morning, and by noon, 3 people had lost their jobs. That's how fast it happened. That's fast 23 years of arrogance, unraveled in the lobby of a Marriott hotel in downtown Ottawa. But to understand what that phone call meant, you have to go back to the moment it started. Back to the revolving door, the grey November light, and a woman named Brigadier-General Adaola Nwosu-Fairbanks stepping off a military transport van with a single carry-on bag and a reservation she'd held for 6 weeks. Nwosu-Fairbanks was 51 years old. She had served in the Canadian Armed Forces for 27 years. She had been deployed to Bosnia, Afghanistan, and Mali. She had received the Meritorious Service Medal twice. She had briefed the Minister of National Defence in the same room where decisions about human lives get made. And she had never once raised her voice to do it. She was not in uniform that morning. She wore a charcoal wool coat, dark slacks, and low heels. She carried no insignia, no rank, nothing that announced who she was. She looked, to anyone not paying close attention, like a professional woman in her early 50s checking into a hotel on a weekday. That was the problem, apparently. Or rather, that was the excuse. The conference she was attending didn't begin until the following morning. She'd arrived early to review materials and get a proper night's sleep before 2 days of senior leadership sessions. She walked through the revolving door, crossed the marble floor toward the front desk, and set her bag down. The man behind the counter was named Craig Del Vecchio. He was 34, had worked the front desk for 11 years, and had, by all accounts from co-workers, a particular way of deciding who deserved his attention before they'd said a single word. He looked at Nwosu-Fairbanks for approximately 3 seconds before he looked back down at his screen. She waited. He typed something, looked up again briefly, looked back down. "Help you?" he finally said. Not as a question so much as a mild inconvenience being acknowledged. She gave him her name and her confirmation number. He typed slowly, with the deliberate energy of someone not trying very hard. Then he frowned. "This reservation is under a Department of National Defence account." "That's correct," she said. "Those are usually for..." He paused, started again. "Do you have your employee ID?" She handed him her government-issued ID card without comment. He looked at it, looked at her, looked at it again in a way that was not about verifying information. It was about deciding whether to accept what was in front of him. "This says Brigadier General." "It does." Another pause. He set the card down on the counter, rather than handing it back to her directly. "I'm going to need to verify this booking," he said. "The DND account has certain protocols. I've stayed at Marriott properties on this account 14 times in the past 4 years," she said. "There are no additional protocols." He smiled then, which was somehow worse than the frown. It was the smile of a man who has decided he is being patient with someone difficult. "Ma'am, I'm just doing my job." "So am I," she said. "And mine starts tomorrow at 8 a.m, which is why I'd like to check in now." He asked her to wait. She waited. He picked up a phone, spoke quietly to someone for 2 minutes, hung up. Then he turned to his computer again, clicked through several screens, and said, without looking at her, "I'm going to need a personal credit card on file. The corporate account doesn't cover incidentals." "It covered incidentals on my last 6 bookings," she said. Policy may have changed. It had not changed. She knew it had not changed because she had reviewed the DND travel policy 12 days earlier. But she handed him a personal card because she had a conference to prepare for, and no interest in spending her morning in an argument with a man who had already decided she was not worth his full attention. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Del Vecchio processed the card, printed the key packet, slid it across the counter. Then, just as she was picking up her bag, he said, "Elevators around the corner. Housekeeping can help with the bags if you need." There was nothing technically wrong with that sentence. It was, on its surface, a perfectly ordinary piece of hotel information. But Nwosu-Fairbanks offered. She had been offered bellhop service, as though she were a guest who might not know how to find an elevator, as though she might need to be directed, as though, and this was the part that landed quietly and precisely, she was the kind of guest who needed to be managed rather than welcomed. She picked up her bag. She said nothing. She walked to the elevator, went upstairs, set her coat on the chair by the window, and sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, looking at the grey sky over the Rideau Canal. Then she called her aide. Not about Craig Del Vecchio, not yet. She called to confirm her schedule and to ask that her updated briefing notes be sent to her secure email. They spoke for 7 minutes. She had a coffee from the in-room machine, which was terrible, and ate the granola bar she'd brought from home, because she knew hotel breakfast wouldn't start until 6:30. She did not think about the front desk again until later that afternoon, when she came back down to the lobby. She had spent the morning in her room, reviewing materials. Around 2 o'clock, she went down to the small hotel restaurant to get a proper lunch before the evening reading she'd planned. She was seated, eventually, after standing at the host stand for 4 minutes, while 2 other couples were seated first, at a table near the kitchen. She noticed. She noted it the way she noted most things, not with visible reaction, but with the particular internal stillness of a person who has been cataloguing this kind of treatment for 30 years and understands exactly what it means. She ordered. She ate. She tipped 20% and left. On her way back through the lobby, she passed the front desk again. A different woman was now behind the counter, helping a guest. Craig Del Vecchio was standing at the side station near the manager's office. He was talking to another man, mid-40s, wearing a suit jacket over an open-collared shirt, a name tag that read V. Hartley, Guest Services Manager. They were looking at her. She didn't break stride. She was halfway to the elevator when she heard Hartley's voice behind her. "Excuse me, ma'am?" She turned. Hartley was walking toward her with the specific gait of a man who has convinced himself he is handling a delicate situation gracefully. Del Vecchio remained at the side station, watching. "I just wanted to follow up on your check-in this morning," Hartley said. He smiled. "We had a few questions about your booking. It was confirmed 6 weeks ago," she said. "I checked in without issue." Right. He clasped his hands in front of him. "It's just the account you're booked under, the DND account. It's a corporate account, and sometimes those are. There's a process for verifying the end user, as it were." "End user," she repeated. "Just standard practice. I provided my government ID this morning," she said. "Brigadier-General Adaola Nwosu-Fairbanks, Department of National Defense. Is there something further you need to verify?" He hesitated. Something shifted behind his eyes, a flicker of recalibration, quickly suppressed. No, that's... We'd just like to make sure our guests are comfortable. If there's anything you need..." "What I needed," she said evenly, "was to check in this morning without being asked to justify my reservation. I've done that, I'm satisfied." She paused. "Are you?" Hartley opened his mouth, closed it. "Enjoy your stay," he finally said. She turned and walked to the elevator. That evening, she drafted a brief note in her personal correspondence file. It was 3 sentences. It named Craig Del Vecchio, named V. Hartley, described the interaction at check-in, and noted the seating incident at the restaurant. She dated it, saved it, and went back to her briefing documents. She was not angry. She was clear. There is a difference, and it matters. The conference the next day went well. She delivered her portion of the session. A 40-minute address on integrated command structures and multinational coordination to 89 people, including 2 other general officers, 4 colonels, and a deputy minister. She received a standing ovation that lasted longer than she'd expected, and felt slightly awkward about, because she'd only done the job. She had dinner with colleagues, slept well, and checked out the following morning. At the front desk, there was a different clerk, young, efficient, pleasant. The checkout took 4 minutes. No complications. She handed back her keys, confirmed her receipt, and walked toward the door. Then she stopped. She turned back to the clerk, whose name tag read Janelle, and said, "Could you tell me who the general manager of this property is?" Janelle looked up. "That would be Mr. Bernard Quennell. Would you like to leave a message?" "No," said Nwosu-Fairbanks. "I have what I need. Thank you." She walked out into the November air, got into the waiting transport, and pulled out her phone. She did not call Bernard Quennell. She called Colonel Isabelle Tran-Bouchard at the Directorate of Canadian Forces Housing and Hospitality Services, the office responsible for all DND-affiliated accommodation contracts, including the National Marriott corporate account that represented, in annual spend, somewhere in the range of $4 million. The call lasted 9 minutes. She described what happened at check-in. She described the restaurant. She described Hartley's follow-up conversation in the lobby. She named names. She gave dates and times. She read from the 3 sentences she had written the night before, and then she added the details she hadn't written down, because she hadn't needed to. She remembered all of it. Tran-Bouchard listened without interrupting. When Nwosu-Fairbanks finished, there was a brief silence. "I'll make some calls," Trambachard said. I know you will, said Nwosu-Fairbanks. Thank you, Isabel. She hung up, put her phone in her coat pocket, watched Ottawa pass outside the van window. What happened next took 11 days. It would be worth knowing, because this part often gets left out, that the Marriott corporate account, held by the Department of National Defence, was not a small line item. It covered accommodation for personnel travelling on duty across 14 Canadian cities. It had been in place for 9 years. It was, for the properties that held it, the kind of contract that doesn't get renegotiated. It gets renewed, quietly every 2 years, because the volume is reliable and the client is the federal government. Bernard Quesnel learned about the complaint on day 3. He had not been present during any of the incidents, which meant that his first awareness of the situation came in the form of a formal written inquiry from the DND Directorate, carbon copied to Marriott Canada's Regional Director of Operations. He read it once, read it again. Then he went and found Craig Delvecchio. The conversation that followed was not recorded, but the outcome was. Craig Delvecchio resigned 4 days later, effective immediately, citing personal reasons. V. Hartley was placed on administrative review. The review concluded within a week. He was dismissed. Bernard Quesnel submitted a formal written apology to the Directorate of Canadian Forces Housing and Hospitality Services, signed personally, on hotel letterhead. He then sent a separate letter directly to Brigadier-General Nwosu-Fairbanks, also personally signed. She read it, filed it. The DND account was flagged for review. Marriott Canada's regional director flew to Ottawa for a meeting with Tran Bouchard's office. New protocols were discussed. A mandatory sensitivity and dignity in service training module was introduced for all properties holding federal government accounts in the national capital region. None of that reversed what happened in that lobby on a Tuesday morning. It didn't undo the 4 minutes at the host stand, or the comment about the elevator, or the particular quality of attention that Craig Delvecchio had offered a brigadier general he'd decided, in 3 seconds, without a word, was not worth his full effort. But consequences, when they finally arrive, have a way of clarifying things. There's a version of this story that focuses on the rank, on the fact that she was a brigadier general, that she had access to a phone number that most guests don't have, that the outcome was possible because of who she was, rather than because of what's done to her. That version isn't wrong exactly, but it misses the point. What Craig Delvecchio didn't know, what he never once considered, was that he was making a decision. Not about a reservation, not about a corporate account, a decision about who deserved his attention, his courtesy, his basic professional respect, before she had said a single word. He made that decision in 3 seconds, and he made it the same way people have been making it for a very long time, and he had made it, by the accounts of his former co-workers, many times before. The rank didn't create the injustice. It just made the injustice impossible to ignore. Brigadier-General Adaola Nwosu-Fairbanks did not raise her voice once during the entirety of those 2 days. She did not demand to speak to a manager. She did not make a scene in the lobby, or post anything publicly, or do any of the things people sometimes imagine are required to be taken seriously. She took careful note of what happened. She let the conference happen. She checked out. And then, quietly, with complete precision, she made a phone call to someone who needed to know. That's it. That's the whole of what she did. And that was enough. The next time you walk into a room and someone looks at you for 3 seconds and decides you're not worth their full attention, remember that they are making a choice. They have decided, before knowing anything about you, what kind of treatment you've earned. Sometimes the consequences arrive quickly. Sometimes they take longer. But the choice they made, that moment, that 3-second judgment, that's already done. It can't be taken back. What you carry into that room has always been yours. What they chose to miss is on them. Think about the people in your life who have been in that lobby, who have stood at that counter, handed over the right ID, said the right words, and still been made to feel like they needed to justify being there. Some of them had phone numbers like hers. Most of them didn't. And if that thought sits uncomfortably with you, good. Hold on to it. That discomfort is where the real conversation starts.